everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today I am doing my holiday book shopping guide. I know this is a little bit early, and I have been planning on releasing this on the 1st of December, but I am getting emails from every blog, every website that I follow, and everybody is putting out their gift giving guide because of issues with the supply, and maybe because people need some happiness amongst everything that has been happening in the world. But if you celebrate the holidays and if you like to buy gifts for the people that you love, then I am hopeful that this book buying guide will be helpful to you. I have divided up this video into a number of categories. I'm not sure how many there are, but I will timestamp them. So if there is a specific person on your list that you want to buy a present for, then hopefully this will help provide you with some direction. This is one of the videos where I get to talk about the books other than fantasy that I read, and I feel like I have a lot of recommendations for non-fantasy books, but because I started the channel as a way to get back to reading fantasy, I think that I talk mostly about fantasy, which I'm really happy about. But it's nice to have these videos every once in a while where I can throw out some of my other recommendations and hopefully introduce people to some books that they haven't read before. If you do not celebrate the holidays, then hopefully this will still be a helpful recommendations video for you if you find books that are suited to your particular tastes. This is going to be lengthy, I assume, because there are a lot of different categories, which is hopefully where the timestamps will help. I'm going to do it more rapid fire with not a huge explanation of each book because I don't want this to be too long. And hopefully, like I said, it will be helpful to you. If you're not ready for the holiday spirit, then I apologize. Feel free to edit the video, and I will see you with my regularly scheduled one next week. But for everybody who is interested, I'm going to go down through these topics, and hopefully you will find something that is of interest to you. So, the very first category that I have here is if you are looking for a gift for people in your book club. So this could either be someone that is in a book club that you share or someone who you know is in a book club, and you want to get them a book that will promote a lot of discussion, that will appeal to a wide variety of readers, and at least in my opinion should be a book that is not too lengthy. I think those are kind of the parameters that make the perfect book club book. I'm not talking about our traditional or kind of the stereotyped idea of a book club, which are the kinds of books that I imagine my mom really likes to read. And I do not mean that in any sort of derogatory way. It's just that that is a particular classification of book. But these books are more books that I think have universal themes, appeal to a wide variety of readers, and are very interesting. And the three books that I have picked are Lamb by Christopher Moore, which is a humorous book about the life of Biff, who is the best friend of Jesus Christ. So this follows Biff in his adventures and misadventures and includes a lot of biblical allusions. This is, I think, a fantastic book for people whether they are part of a faith or not part of a faith. I read it for my book club, actually, and we had a wide variety of readers. Some people who were very much church-going people who felt like this book was a good exploration and brought up a lot of good themes and ideas without being disrespectful, and then people who very much were not part of that world and just enjoyed this as a good story. It sparked a lot of conversation, and when I read it in our book club, everybody really enjoyed it. So it's really, really funny, but also has some really moving and some really profound passages. So I thought that it was great. I would highly recommend it, and I think it would make a good selection for someone who likes having a little bit more to think about and likes that kind of book club type of book. The second book that I have on this list is a little bit darker, but still a book that promotes a lot of good discussion, and that book is My Dark Vanessa. My Dark Vanessa is a book that was making the rounds on BookTube last year. There were a lot of people talking about it, and it's a story that is dual timeline, and it follows a young woman who, when she was in her private high school, was engaged in a relationship with a teacher. And it explores that relationship, which this young woman has to reflect on and come to terms with whether or not this was an abusive relationship. And as the reader, we can see all the ways in which this relationship is absolutely coercive, manipulative, abusive, but the young woman who was actually part of the relationship is unable to see that and unable to really appreciate what kind of an effect this has had on her life. This is a book that it's a fantastic read. It is very difficult to read in terms of subject matter, but very easy to read in terms of writing and style. It is a book that I would imagine would promote a lot of discussion, but I think needs to be for a particular type of reader because it is a heavy topic and there are some passages that are really difficult to read about. But if you have a friend or a family member who likes some of those deeper reads that have a lot to explore, then I think that that is a fantastic choice. And kind of the newest selection, so the third selection for this category, is Sorrowland by River Solomon. This is a book that I read this year. It is one of my favorite releases of 2021. And I think that this is just a phenomenal book, but also an excellent book for book clubs. It explores a variety of themes like intergenerational trauma, how race impacts people and the way that they live in the world and relate to other people. It explores independence and being entwined with your family and how you separate yourself from your upbringing. It has a mix of kind of fantasy elements, of horror elements, and it has a good mix of what I would call literary fiction, so just exploration of theme, really strong central character. The writing is beautiful, and it is very short. There is a surprising amount of story packed into a very short book, so I think that this would be fantastic for a book club, and I would recommend it for anyone. It was definitely one of my favorites of the year. And then moving on, our next category is for someone who loves Hallmark movies. So this, for me in my life, this would be the kind of book that I would get for my mom or that I would get for her to read. So someone who just loves the Christmas spirit, kind of gets wrapped up in everything, likes those feel-good kind of romantic books or movies and is looking for a book that will be the equivalent. So I have 3 recommendations for this one as well. And the first one is Landline by Rainbow Rowell. So this is a Christmas book that follows a married couple who has kind of hit a stagnation point in their marriage. The wife is a workaholic, the husband is a stay-at-home dad, and they are not communicating well, and neither one of them seems to be particularly happy within their relationship. This kind of comes to a breaking point when the wife decides not to return to her husband's in-laws' house for Christmas because she's working on a project at work that she's really excited about. They get into a fight before he leaves, and when she calls him on her old rotary phone because her cell phone dies, and she calls him on this old rotary phone and ends up calling him in the past. So she's making calls to him when he was her boyfriend, and she gets to re-explore their relationship. She gets to come to terms with some of the difficulties that they're having at the present time. It's a very emotional book. It has a lot of high drama and definitely follows that kind of classic Hallmark formula, but I really like it. I really enjoy Rainbow Rowell's dialogue. I think that her characters are always very vibrant, and this is definitely one of my favorite Christmas books. I reread it almost every year, and I always have a great time when I am doing so. The second book that I put on this list is actually one that I haven't read, so hopefully I'm still allowed to do that. And that is Dash and Lily's Book of Dares by, I think it's David, I wrote it down here, yes, David Levithan and Rachel Cohn. So this is a show that was released on Netflix last year that's based off the YA novel of the same name. And I watched the show when it was released, and it was a really cute Christmas story about a young girl and a young boy who grow up, I believe it's in New York City, and they write each other dares back and forth. So one of them finds this book with a dare written in it, and they decide to do it and then write back, and it kind of has this back and forth dynamic. And I really liked it as a Netflix series. I thought it was really cute. It put me in the holiday spirit. And so I figured if the show was fun, then probably the book would be too. I did look up some reviews, and people do seem to really like it. So I think that that would make a great choice for someone who is looking for that type of book to read. And the final book that I wanted to put on here is probably the most sentimental of the batch, and that is A Deal of a Lifetime by Frederick Bachman. So this is a very short little novelette, and I don't want to tell you anything about it because it is so short. But what I will say is if you really like Frederick Bachman's writing style, or if the person that you're buying a gift for likes that type of book, this is a really charming, a very sentimental. I think it was a little bit too sentimental for me, but I think if you're someone who really likes that kind of high emotionality of the Hallmark movies, then this would probably really appeal. It's a very sentimental story about the holidays and what it means to care for someone, what it means to love someone, and the idea of giving and sacrifice. So it explores a lot of those themes. It is, if you are someone who falls victim to that kind of wringing of your emotions, I think that this would be a book that would definitely make you cry, and I think that it would be a great story to pick up for someone for Christmas. So those are my Hallmark Christmas recommendations. Number 3 are books that have a unique narrative structure. So if you are buying for someone on your list who reads a lot and you want to get them something that feels fresh or something that plays with narrative in a way that might feel unique. So to me, these are books that I would buy someone who I know reads a lot, and I want to get them something that's going to feel totally different from anything else that they have read. And I have 3 recommendations for this one as well. And they're kind of they're differing levels of what I would call difficulty, or it takes a differing amount of examination or reflection when you're reading them. So the first one is just really a fun book, and I read this in a book club a couple of years ago, and it's called Ella Minnow P. And it tells the story of this girl named Ella who lives in a town whose founder was responsible for writing and now I don't remember the name of the term, but it is a sentence that uses all the letters of the alphabet, and I will pop that up because I don't remember what it is. But it's the sentence, "The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog," I think. I'll pop that up there too. Should have prepared for this a little bit better. But anyway, her town was founded by that person. And so the people who live in this town are very proud of their heritage. And one day, one of the letters falls off the statue that they have constructed. And the town does not know what to do. Everyone kind of goes into a flurry of activity. And what they decide is this is a sign from the founder that we are not respectful enough of language. We are letting our language skills pass us by, and we are being punished for that now. So they decide that that letter needs to be stricken from the alphabet. And nobody who lives in this town is allowed to say anything, any word that contains that letter. And as the letters continue to fall from the statue, they continue to restrict what people are allowed to say, and they become more militant about how they enforce those rules. And the really cool thing is, as the letters are taken away from the town, so they are removed from the book. So the author doesn't use any of the letters that have fallen down from this statue either. And it's really fun. I have not read anything else like this. It's not incredibly deep. It's not incredibly thematically rich, but it's just really fun. It is one of the most interesting books that I have ever read, and I think that it would be a really cool gift for someone who reads a lot, because it is certainly the only book like that I have ever read. The second book that I really enjoy with a complex or interesting narrative structure is the book Trust Exercise by Susan Choi is the author for this one. This is a book that I read a couple of years ago, and I think it actually may have been the book that led me to discover BookTube, because when I was finished, I didn't know anybody else who had read it, and it was the kind of book that I wanted to talk about immediately. So this one definitely has crossover appeal to the book club category as well, because I think this is a book that promotes a lot of discussion. But it follows various people who were members of the same high school, and specifically the same high school drama club. And there are several different timelines, and we are hearing this story from several different perspectives. And we hear the story of what kind of went on in this drama club between the students themselves, the teachers and the students, and how the actions and what took place during those years kind of reverberates across time. I am not going to say anything else, because I think that the only way to truly enjoy this book is to experience it for yourself. But if you like literary fiction, if you have someone on your Christmas list who has read extensively and you're looking to offer them something that maybe they haven't experienced before, this was definitely one of the most unique books that I have ever read. When I perused Goodreads afterwards, I got the impression that a lot of people were like, that was really interesting. I don't know if I liked it. Did I love it? Did I hate it? Like, it leaves you befuddled at the end in the very best way. And I thought that it was fantastic. I would highly recommend it to that person who really wants a unique reading experience. And then for the very last book in this category, I wanted to recommend the book, This Is How You Lose the Time War. So this is one that gets talked about a little bit on BookTube. And this is an epistolary novel. It's told from a series of letters that are written back and forth between two individuals who are on opposite sides of a war that is spanning over time, like over generations, thousands of years. And they are supposed to be fighting against one another, and they start writing these letters back and forth, and they begin to fall in love with each other over the course of communicating through these letters. I personally listened to this by audiobook, and I thought it was one of the strangest things that I had ever read. It is very short. It definitely has incredibly stylized writing, so if that is something that you are not into, then I don't think that you would enjoy this. But if you like kind of overly poetic language, you like those kind of unique narrative structures, and you're looking for an interesting book that doesn't feel quite like anything that you've ever read before, then I would definitely recommend picking this one up. And then on to our next category. This one's a pretty easy one, pretty straightforward. This is just for people who enjoy reading nonfiction. So I just wanted to give a couple of my favorite nonfiction recommendations. So my all-time favorite, and the first one that I recommend for anyone who has not read it, is On Writing by Stephen King. I know that I'm a big Stephen King fan, but you do not need to be a big Stephen King fan to enjoy this book. This is for anyone who likes reading fantasy or horror, anyone who's interested in the writing process, and anyone who just likes a good autobiography, because this includes a lot of fascinating things about Stephen King's life, and he's led a pretty interesting life. It's very easy to get through. His writing style is very accessible and keeps you wanting to turn the page, so definitely recommend that one. My second recommendation for nonfiction is the book The Truth About Animals. So this is a book for anybody who has ever sat down to watch the Discovery Channel, to watch the National Geographic animal documentaries, anyone who loves Planet Earth. This is one of the most fascinating works of nonfiction that I have ever read. So it's written by a zoologist, which is great because it's written by someone who knows what they're talking about. And each section of the book follows a different animal. So there's a chapter on sloths, there's a chapter for hippos, there's a chapter for vultures, there's a chapter for eels, there's a bunch of different animals, some of them kind of animals that we'd find popular in, pop culture, and some that are a little bit more obscure. And it talks about some interesting or unique characteristics of these animals, but also how we as human beings have a tendency to anthropomorphize animals and to view them or try to understand them in terms of our own human morals or values. So we will see them doing things that we either find very interesting or very disturbing, but it's just part of their nature. We only find it to be that way because of our own outlook on life. So it's kind of like part informative documentary, part anthropological exploration, and part just like super fun facts. If you were someone who liked reading those science fact books when you were a kid, then you would definitely love this work of nonfiction. And then for the third book on the list, I decided to include Erik Larson's most recent release, which is called, I'm just going to look at my cards here. Yes, The Splendid and the Vile. So Erik Larson has written a number of works of nonfiction, many of which are critically acclaimed. I know one that people really like is The Devil in the White City, which follows the events of the Chicago World Fair. I wish I could remember which year it was, but I do not remember. But that's one of his most popular books. This is one of his more recent releases. I believe it came out last year, and it is focused on London at the beginning of the Blitz in World War II. So there's a lot of information about Winston Churchill, and just a lot about how London, the city, reacted to this kind of barrage, this bombardment during World War II. And so it kind of explores that whole idea of keep calm and carry on. And what did that mean, and how is that actually reflected in society? I think that Erik Larson does a great job of writing nonfiction in general. It's very accessible, very fluid, and I think it has a good balance of kind of the facts and the narrative style. So it comes together to feel very much like fiction when it is, very well researched and very thorough. So would definitely recommend that for any history buffs on your Christmas list. I really enjoyed it. And then next, I have recommendations for new parents who love fantasy. So this obviously works if you're buying for a new baby or toddler who is in your life, or if you have friends who are expecting and you want to get them a Christmas present. These are a couple of my absolute favorite children's books, and I've stuck with newer children's books because we all have our favorites from our own childhood, but if you haven't been reading kids' books for a really long time, these are 3 that I think are particularly fun and appeal to parents who like fantasy. These are the ones that I found I could read over and over and over and still enjoy, regardless of how many times I had read them. So the very first one is called The Princess and the Pony by Kate Beaton. And this is about a young, she seems to be a Viking princess based on the artwork. So a young Viking princess who wants to be a warrior princess, and she wants to get a real warrior's horse for her birthday. And instead of getting her warrior's horse, she gets a pony who's not quite right. And so it's about her adventures with this pony and how she finds her inner heroism. So I think it's really sweet. The artwork is really cute, and we read this approximately 10,000 times with our children. So I think it has a lot of rereadability, and it can extend into the older years. So it's one that definitely appeals as your kids age up a little bit as well. My second recommendation is the book Zog by Julia Donaldson. So Julia Donaldson wrote The Gruffalo, which is her like uber popular children's book, but I really like Zog. I love The Gruffalo, but I don't know, I think I might prefer Zog. Zog is the story about a dragon who is trying to earn his golden star at dragon school. And so he has to complete a number of tasks, and he is not the most ferocious or the most cunning dragon, and so he actually ends up receiving help from a princess throughout the story. And there's a lot of really unique twists at the end of this, where we get to see some things from both Zog as the dragon and from the princess that kind of bulk against common tropes in children's literature. It's really, really fun. The illustrations are really bright and vibrant and kind of capture kids' attention. So I think that one is really exciting, really well done, and my kids really loved it. And then for the final recommendation, I'm going to recommend the book Donuts for a Dragon by, I always forget their names. I think it's Lee Wildish and Gillian Flynn, maybe. I don't remember. I will pop it up on the screen. But this is actually a series of kids' books. So this is called George's Excellent Adventures. And there's a bunch of them. The very first one was called Spaghetti with the Yeti, but it revolves around this little boy named George, and there's always some sort of fantastical creature and some sort of treat involved. So in Donuts for a Dragon, George goes on a quest to find a dragon, and he brings along some treats to try to lure the dragon over to his side. But these are your kind of standard rhyming picture books. The character of George is very easy to fall in love with. My kids love these books. We have had to buy multiple copies of Donuts for a Dragon and Spaghetti with the Yeti, maybe the first one. But there are multiple installations of this book series that we had to buy numerous copies for because we read them so many times that they just disintegrated. This is probably my kids' favorite ongoing series of kids' books, and I think would make a fantastic present for any child or new parent on your list. And then from there, kind of a similar but different category would be books for future fantasy lovers. So this is for any kids who are just starting to read on their own, or kids who are able to sit down for a little longer period of time to be read to by their parents. And so I have 3 recommendations here as well. And those would be Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim. So that's kind of my classic recommendation. This follows the story of Mrs. Frisby, whose son is sick, and she needs to try to get help to move him before the plow comes to plow the fields in the spring. And she solicits the help of the Rats of Nim, who are rats that have been genetically enhanced in a research facility, so at the National Institute of Mental Health. And this is just a beautiful adventure story that shows the power of parental love, the value of cooperation, and also how humans interact with animals and how we may impact the animals around us. So my kids really loved this one. We have read it a couple of times actually, and they really, really enjoyed it. Second, I'm going to put one of my favorite kind of introductory children's novels, which is Fortunately, the Milk by Neil Gaiman. This one's very short. You could read it in a sitting or two. It's almost like a long form picture book. It kind of toes that line. But it follows the story of a dad who goes out to buy milk for his family, and on the way, he is abducted by aliens. And that so begins his journey of kind of cross-dimensional, cross-time hero's quest to get this milk back to his kids without ending the universe as we know it. I think Neil Gaiman's love of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy really comes to light in this book. So if you're a parent who really loved Hitchhiker's Guide and you're looking for a story to read aloud to your kids, then 100% pick up Fortunately the Milk. I think that it will provide a great experience for both parent and child. And then for my very last recommendation here, I'm going to give one of my daughter's favorite novels that she has read, and that is Pip Bartlett's Guide to Magical Creatures. So this is a short series for young readers that follows Pip Bartlett, who is a young woman who has the ability to hear magical creatures as they are talking. So this world is populated with a variety of magical creatures, some recognizable to us, such as unicorns or griffins, and some that Maggie Stiefvater, the author, made up specifically for this book. I think this encapsulates every young child's fondest wish, which is to be able to communicate with animals and to be able to have your own special relationship with magical creatures. There's 3 of them, and they all kind of revolve around a central mystery, but these would be perfect for young kids who love fantasy, who love magical creatures, and specifically unicorns, because there are unicorns that show up in every story, but had a great time reading these as well. They're easy to get through. They have little illustrations throughout, and overall, just a fantastic time. From there, this is a category that I really like, and I have 2 suggestions for this one because I do think that this is a little bit harder to think about, and if you have any suggestions, feel free to kind of leave them below. But this is for, I called it a reluctant teen reader, like if you have a reluctant teenager on your list, but it could also work for just a reluctant young adult or a reluctant reader in general. So this is someone who you would really like to get them to read a book, but they don't have a lot of interest in reading. The books that I recommend would be, so I have 2, like I said. The very first one is called Robopocalypse. So I've talked about this book a couple of times on the channel because it is a book that genuinely surprised me. My husband picked this when we were in a book club together, and when he picked it, I thought it was going to be absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the title itself is Robopocalypse. I thought it was going to be like maybe so cheesy it was good, but mostly just really bad. And I ended up really enjoying it. It is the story of, as it says in the title, a robopocalypse, and we follow the perspective of a bunch of different people who were involved in this AI/robotic uprising, and this takes place post-apocalypse, and we're kind of reflecting back on what has happened. It's very fast-paced. It has very short, quick chapters. And I have given this to a bunch of people in my life who never read anything, have a hard time finishing any books, haven't read anything since high school or maybe since childhood, and they have made it all the way through Robopocalypse and ended up really enjoying it. If this is someone who likes action movies or like enjoys the Marvel Cinematic Universe and wants that kind of high action, high concept story that is very easy to flip through, then Robopocalypse is my absolute recommendation for that. If you have someone on your list who is less into kind of the sci-fi fantasy elements and wants something that is more true to life, another book that I think has a lot of appeal to young people who don't read a lot is the book called, I need to look at the title exactly, Why We Broke Up. So I wasn't sure if it was This Is Why We Broke Up or not, but Why We Broke Up by Daniel Handler, who is Lemony Snicket, who wrote the series of Unfortunate Events. So this is an illustrated book that follows the story of a couple who has recently broken up, and we look at a box of possessions that one of them is returning to the other, and each one of these possessions shows a part of their relationship and shows how circumstances led to their eventual breakup. So it is kind of learning how to process the loss of that first love or that first relationship. And it's not super long. It is illustrated and the illustrations are really nice. And I think it is just one of those universal stories that appeals to almost everyone because we have all been there. We have all gone through that initial breakup, that first heartbreak. And it's really bittersweet to look back on that. And I just thought that this was a really unique young adult story. This was unlike anything else that I had read. I really like Daniel Handler's writing. I enjoy the series of unfortunate events, and I think that he has a great sense of humor. So I really enjoyed this one and would recommend it to any kind of young people on your list that don't read as often, but you might want to kind of push something into their hands. From there, my next recommendation is literary fiction. So if you have someone on your list who likes to read a lot of literary fiction, or maybe they're not into genre fiction and you just want to get them a book that you think will have that kind of universal appeal, I have 3 suggestions for this one as well. The very first suggestion that I have is the book Barney's Version by Mordecai Richler. So this is one of my favorite works of Canadian fiction. Mordecai Richler is a Canadian author and is probably my husband's favorite book of all time. But it tells the story of Barney, who has had numerous marriages throughout his life. And the book is broken up into sections, and each section encompasses the part of his life that he spent with a specific romantic partner. And Barney is the epitome of an unreliable narrator. So if you love fantasy books that have unreliable narrators and you're looking for literary fiction that has that same kind of trope or concept, look no further. This is really funny in a dark way. It is poignant. It is sad. It gives you a lot to reflect on. It's a great character study. And they made a movie of it as well. So if you like to read the book and then watch the movie, then this gives you kind of double the entertainment. And actually, it's fitting for fantasy fans because one of the main characters in the movie is the actress who plays Moraine in Wheel of Time. So if you enjoy her acting in Wheel of Time, then you can then go back and watch Barney's Version to see her in that. The second recommendation that I have here is one that I took off the list of Pulitzer Prize winners. And the one that I pulled off, I believe, I believe it was the winner in 2018. But it may have been 2020. I will double check. But it is called Less, and the author is Andrew Sean Greer. So this is a book that I was surprised when I read it, because usually the Pulitzer Prize winners that I have read tend to be much more on the serious side. And this was actually really funny. This was very lighthearted and humorous for the type of book that usually wins that award. And what it is that it is a young man, I believe he's in he's in his late 20s or early 30s. And he finds out that the man that he was in love with for most of his life is getting married to someone else. So he sets off on a journey around the world, which is kind of a play on the Odyssey. And we see him as he goes to different places and goes through various stages. And it talks a lot about the nature of relationships in the modern world, how we identify to other people, if we allow ourselves to find true connection, our obsession with youth and beauty, and how that impacts our interpersonal relationships. There's a little bit of hero's journey thrown in there. So if you like that trope in fantasy, then this would probably be a good place to start for literary fiction. But I really ended up enjoying it. It was a lot funnier and a lot more kind of tender-hearted than I usually expect from the Pulitzer Prize winners. So I think that this is a good suggestion for someone on the list who's looking for something a little more literary, but still wants it to feel kind of low-key for Christmas. And then for the holidays, I should say. And the third one that I want to recommend is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. So this is, again, another relatively recent release. She has another very popular book called Little Fires Everywhere that became a television series. So that one is probably a little bit more well-known. But this integrates kind of elements of literary fiction and then also has this underlying kind of murder mystery throughout the story. It follows a mixed-race family after the death of one of their children. We're trying to figure out what happened to this child and look at the dynamics of the family at large, what kinds of strain the family is under, what kinds of things they have struggled with over the course of their lifetimes. And I just really enjoy Celeste Ng's writing. I preferred this book to Little Fires Everywhere, but I enjoyed both of them. So if you're looking for that what I would call kind of toes the line between high concept and literary fiction. It's very literary in its writing style, in its prose, but feels a bit more like genre fiction in terms of the story and the way that the plot unfolds. Then this is a fantastic selection. I did buy this one for my mother-in-law a couple of years ago, and she really enjoyed it as well. And then we go on to these are less about recommendations for plot and just gift ideas in general. So the first recommendation that I want to make is for people who are collectors of books. So we all know about the Folio Society, and we all know about Juniper Books, and we know about a lot of these kind of high-end boutiques that sell collector's editions, but I don't know that books like that are particularly feasible for most of us. I do not own any books from those companies, but I have seen other people who have unboxed them, and they do look beautiful. And if that is within your budget, then I am very happy, and I hope that you really love your beautiful books. But I think that there are a lot of really beautiful editions of books that are a lot more accessible and a lot more realistic for most people's budgets. And so I have outlined a couple of my favorite special editions that will not completely tank your bank account. And the very first one that I want to talk about is Mina Lima. So Mina Lima is a company that makes special edition children's classics. So all of the books that they have put out so far have been children's classics, and they have a bunch. They have one that's Alice in Wonderland, they have a Peter Pan one, they have The Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast, and recently they have also started releasing Harry Potter editions as well. So I think they have the first 2 Harry Potter books that are out. But these are interactive special editions, so the covers are very beautiful. I'll pop one up on the screen. But when you open up the book, there's a lot of interactive elements. So you'll get some like pop-out pictures, you'll get ones where you get to kind of move and adjust the handles. Think about the picture books or the kinds of interactive books you loved as a kid, but kind of scaled up for adulthood. So these are great for decorations. I have a couple that I use upstairs just for home decor because I like to integrate books into my home decor, and they are beautiful, but they're really fun to read as well. You just need to be very careful with them. I don't think this would make a great present for young readers unless they are a lot more careful than my kids, but I think that they make for beautiful additions to any collector's home. The next kind of accessible type of collector's edition are the Barnes & Noble leather-bound editions. Now, I don't live in the States, so I don't own any of these Barnes & Noble leather-bound editions, but I have looked at them extensively, and they offer a wide variety of titles, and they seem to be very beautiful, at least to look at. I'm sure the quality is not going to be the same as if you are buying like a $400 leather-bound copy of Warbreaker from Brandon Sanderson, but a lot of them are in kind of the $20 to $40 range, and I think that especially if this is going to be something for someone who collects books and they want something beautiful to display on their bookshelves that is not going to be kind of read and reread all the time, they have a lot of really beautiful editions. One particular favorite of mine is their edition of A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. I would really love to get that book. So if I ever am in a position where I can find it, I will definitely snap it up. But I think that it is a great budget-friendly special edition for people to buy. And then the very last one is the Canterbury Classics series. So I think they actually sell these ones through Juniper Books, but in like huge quantities. So you have to buy like 30 of them at once. In Canada, where I have seen them, is actually at Costco. So the one that I have is Thomas Mallory's Morte d'Arthur. So I have that particular edition, and I can pop a picture up of that one. But in terms of quality, I think that it's pretty nice. The binding seems very tight. It's very nice to look at. It feels really good. The print is quite small inside, but I didn't buy this copy to read. I bought it to display, and I keep it on display up in my living room. The color matches kind of the room decor, and I really like having it up there. So if you're looking for something, I think if you buy these independently, they're around like $30 a book. So I think that that is very affordable compared to a lot of those kind of specialty books that are out there. And then the very last category that I have put on here are coffee table books. So this is if you want to buy someone a book that can be used to display in the home, something that people can kind of pick up and rifle through. I really like it when friends have books on their coffee tables and I can kind of look at them. I have permission to flick through them when I go to their house because obviously I really like books and I like picking them up and looking at them. And there are a couple that I have on display in my house that I also think make for really good coffee table books. So the suggestions that I have for a variety of interests are, the first one would be the Edith Hamilton's book on Greek mythology. So I own a lot of different compendiums of Greek mythology, a lot of different bind-ups, retellings, etc. And this one by Edith Hamilton, I think, is the best comprehensive book about Greek mythology in terms of accessibility, inclusivity, like meaning including a variety of different stories. Because I also have Stephen Fry's new Greek mythology series, which I think is another great kind of coffee table book to get for someone. But his are broken up into various portions of Greek mythology. So we have mythos, which is the kind of introduction to the gods and goddesses, and you get some stories of the Titans. Then you have Heroes, which focuses on a couple of the main heroes from Greek mythology. And then I think there's another one called Troy, which specifically focuses on the Trojan War, but I have not read that one, so I'm not 100% sure. But in terms of having like a comprehensive book, I think that Edith Hamilton's book is really beautiful and a great place to start. So if you're looking for something to add to your collection or to gift to someone else, I think that that is a really good choice. A second book is one that I bought for my mother-in-law and my mom, and I think makes a really great coffee table book. And that is called, and I have to just glance at the title, All in Good Taste by Kate Spade. So this is the very definition of a coffee table book. It has a bunch of kind of high fashion. I don't know. I'm not a very fashionable person, so I don't even really know the words that I'm supposed to use, but pictures of fashionable things, of place settings, how to host a dinner, various style pointers and etiquette pointers. Basically, for anyone who's the opposite of me on your Christmas list, you could pick this up, or on your holiday list. People who are really into that kind of entertainment and enjoy reading about the elements of style. My elements of style would be the E.B. White elements of style about grammar. But if you like the elements of fashion, then definitely this is a really pretty book. It's bright pink, it has a lot of gorgeous illustrations, and it is really fun to flip through. I still had fun looking at it, even though I know that it was not super applicable to my life. So I think that that is also a good choice. And the very last one is a book called Bibliophile by Jane, what is her name? I have it written here, Jane Mount. So this is a coffee table book about books. So about different types of books, when they were published, lists for book lovers. This is basically if you have a book lover on your list who already owns everything, it's impossible to buy them a book because you're not sure what they have read or haven't read, then this is just a pretty illustrated coffee table book that I think would make for a wonderful selection to sit down and just peruse through on Christmas morning. You don't need to put a lot of concentration into it. You can have your hot chocolate, you can eat your candy, you can read this lovely book and enjoy the holidays with your family. But that is the end of my holiday gift guide. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Like I said, everything is time-stamped so you can kind of jump around to the specific category that you're looking for. It is impossible to include everything in a video like this, but if you are looking for specific recommendations, if there's someone on your list that you would love to buy a book for and you want some direction or pointers about where to go, then feel free to leave them down in the comments and I am happy to help to the best of my abilities. Hopefully this was not too early for your tastes. I know that it is a little bit early to be thinking about the holiday season, but I get very excited about Christmas. I support everyone in their kind of Halloween spooky season vibes and getting ready, but I am a Christmas lover at heart. So I hope that whatever you celebrate, you have a great time. If you are not into celebrating the holidays, that you can find some recommendations that you enjoy in this video, and I will see you with another one soon. Bye!